as Keith said, I've been in my position about 2 years. And the objective, basically the objective of the Mountain Pine Beetle Rehab program from the government's point of view is to minimize as much as possible the effects of mortality on the provision of ecological goods and services. That's in a nutshell, and that includes fiber and wood, fiber and clean air, clean water, all the rest of it. Biodiversity, species at risk, habitat, etc. But I'm going to go through. Well, I'll show you the next slide here. So this is kind of an update of what I've been talking about for the last 2 of these sessions. And this will function as an outline as well. When I got into my position, it was really, there was four pieces of program development that I really saw as being necessary to move this program forward. One was, how many dead trees do we have and where are they? What happens to a stand if we do nothing? Those are largely the 2 benchmarks that you really have to establish. What goods and services are important? Where are they? Have they been affected at all? And are they at risk? And then what kind of strategic approach can we use to make good decisions on what stands to rehab and which ones we shouldn't? And a lot of this discussion came up prior to lunch, and I was biting my tongue, but I'll be able to get to it now. So the first step in this was a killed pine inventory. This is really, before you can do anything as far as the Mountain Pine Beetle Rehab program, you have to know what's on the landscape. Without any kind of an inventory, you're blind. So when I came into the position, I looked at what we had, and when we first had the 2006 in-flight, obviously when we did our 2007 aerial survey, we covered everything. So it was 100%, and you can see that's the range of the 2007 aerial survey. So 2013 aerial survey doesn't cover what we initially surveyed in 2006 and 2007. That's different management goals. A lot of those areas we walked away from, and to chase that leading edge, because that's where we do our aerial surveys, is in the leading edge. So we moved out of those areas and into those. But what that left in its wake was is a complete, an incomplete picture of what was going on in that area. So what was dead out there? We had no idea. We had a little bit of pieces here and there where we actually did some work, but it wasn't complete. So we did a little bit of testing to see what could be done to remote sense classify this stuff. And so we ran some tests and it was good. So 2 years ago we initiated a call for proposals to give us some strategies and tactics to remote sense this stuff. So we gave the contract to a company called Castless out of Victoria, and that's who we started doing the work with. And 2 years later, we've had this ongoing for 2 years, like I said. But this is the output that they've given us. And I don't know if you guys can see well, but that's the polygons. So it's down to a single tree level. So this is remote sensed, but it's based on, I won't go into largely because I can't go into the technical details, but what computer techniques they used. But what we did is we classified everything that was greater than 20% pine, lodgepole pine or jack pine by ABI. And the reason we went to 20 versus 50 is sometimes the ABI can be a little less accurate than we hoped. So I wanted a bit of a buffer in there. And what this classification also did, what we asked for was a differentiation between red trees and gray trees. We wanted to know where current infestation was and where it had long since gone. So this is the kind of output we got. And you can see the green patches in between. So it went down to, like I said, the single tree level. But if there was a group of trees, a group of gray touching, it would grab it all, of course. So that's what it looks like. So what we did is this is just a screenshot of a high-res image. That inset down at the bottom right there, it's large. There's a lot of gray in there. This was the polygons that were created.
Brooks, do you want to use the pointer just to?
Sure. Is this on here?
Use the one that looks like a pointer.
This one here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is what was created by the contractor. This is up in P19. So Camp-Foothold area and DMI. This is what the contractor produced. So black is those gray attacks. So it's pretty solid attack there. We then used, this is after a lot of trial and error. We have the polygon data and we thought, okay, what do we do with it now? It's one thing to know that there's dead trees there, but we need to know the impact on the forest resource. So, and we couldn't just use AVI polygon because largely the impact might be at one end of the AVI polygon versus another, so you're not getting an accurate picture of the mortality. So we used a 30 by 30 pixel and used LiDAR to determine the merchantable canopy in a given pixel as the denominator, and then we used the mortality information as the numerator, and that just gave us the percent impact on the crowns in that pixel. So, and I've been working with a remote sensing specialist in our department, or in our branch, named Chris Bader, and he was very helpful in this. So this is what that pixelization looks like. So all of these have some level of impact, but it's based on the initial data. What we then did is group these pixels, and we tried to make disturbance unit polygons out of them. So with an AVI call of half a hectare or greater. So as soon as you had 6 continuous pixels of a certain percentage, that created a disturbance unit. So that's what was created from that initial data set of where we say a stand is given, or is at a certain level that we want to identify. In this case, being dead. And that's what it's come up with. Based on the initial data, this is what's dead on the landscape. So, and I'll talk about that in a bit here. So, the scope of the project, it ended up, this is down, let's see, this is Camforce, this is G15, G16, this is Grand Cache here, so about halfway between Grand Cache and Grand Prairie, and then down in this neck of the woods, and then everything to the northwest of that was classified. So we were looking for those stands that had some historical beetle, and that had a pretty good level of pine. I wasn't looking for every single AVI polygon of pine, which is just not reasonable. But we were looking for those ones that, if they were to die, would be significant. So it ended up being 412 townships of area, which is pretty huge. It's based on 3 years of imagery, which is important to note. So there's some 2013. There's some, most of the bulk of it is captured in 2014, and this is all September. We wanted to do it after the fading, so to catch as much mortality as we possibly could. But there are 3, and then whatever we couldn't capture in 2014 due to smoke in the air, cloud, whatever, or poor image availability, then we collected this last summer. So I've got all that. And it's important to note that it's cumulative impact. It's not just the last couple of years of mortality. It's everything that's died to date. And also of note, it's what's left on the landscape. Like Canfor and other companies have done a very good job of going out there and logging as much as they can of it. So this is what's left after wildfire, after you delete those areas that are private land, after you take out the couple of layers that we have, all that kind of stuff. So that's what's left on the landscape. As far as quality assurance goes, I had to do a lot more than I thought. Out of the 412, I had to sample 215 of them. And I thought I was going to do 10%. So this ate up a lot of my time. But the image quality was variable from within townships, so you had to check a lot. And our spec, we didn't actually, when we set up the spec at first, we didn't think it could be reached. We thought, okay, let's put it out there, we're going to make it tough and see what they can do. It was plus or minus 15% of what I said there was on the high-res imagery. So I would go and I would do my assessment. I would put my dots, as you see here, and then I would overlay their data and compare the two, and they had to be within 15%. What it ended up being, with a lot of variability, but overall it was about 4% difference from what I said versus what they said. But there's a lot of variability in that number, entirely based on the image. So data limitations. again, the classification of the crowns themselves was really, really good. Excellent. But what we really care about, so that gives you the crown impacts. What we really care about is what the on-the-ground impacts are. What's the impact to basal area, what's the impacts to volume? So, which this crown classification cannot give you, but it gives you an assessment of the crown. So, and we know that the basal impacts on the ground are going to be higher than the crown impacts. You have beetles preferentially hitting large trees. You have large aspen crowns that are knocking down which also skews the numbers. You see unseen dead trees from you have a large canopy dead tree, and you might have a small one that you cannot see, which you would pick up on the ground. So there's all these different factors that are providing a different number. So what that is, though, it's not. They're not errors. They're different. You need to calibrate the on the ground to the crown kill, and that's the next step in this process. Currently, we're using 25% as what we're saying is 50% or greater basal area. We're saying it's about 25% crown kill. That's what we're using right now, based on a few permanent sample plots that we had access to that were measured recently, and some of the photo work. We're going to tweak that number with information. We've got a mountain pine beetle. FGRO is working with FRIA and us to. They've established a mountain pine beetle permanent sample plot network, and 105 of the plots are done now. And we're going to be using that information to correlate to the crown kill. So that'll give us a very good handle on what level of crown mortality correlates to a 50% or greater basal area kill. So those numbers will be forthcoming. So this is a picture of what these polygons are what we're calling dead. So there's I think P19 you were showing the pine component, and this is the area that has been most heavily hit, is the P19 area, and that's so these are all dead polygons, or dead disturbance units, I should say, derived from the work, and that's what the purple is. So I've got some totals here. So when I had a roll up done over the entire area, there's about 27,000 hectares of dead pine, and as a percentage, I put some of the most heaviest hit FMUs in here. Like P19, we're looking at about let's see here, what's the number? Pine leading, it's looking at about 11% of the pine leading stands are dead as a number. As far as areas of smaller levels of impact, when you're looking for an impact of 1 to 5%, about 260,000 hectares in the province are at that point. So, not in the province, I should say. It's in our project area. This is P19 itself. So this is like I said, the heaviest hit area. Green are pure pine, so like the dark green are pure pine, so that 80% are pine or 80% pine or greater, and the light green is that 50% pine or greater. And again, the purple are mortality units. So you can see there's a fair bit of activity going on in there, and that, like I said, that's the heaviest hit by far. It's probably not a surprise to a lot of the guys that work up there. So as far as data availability, I just had an update this morning on my email that the final data is available to GOA staff, and I've also been signing on with data share agreements with a number of people in here. I think most of you would have this information now that have been affected by this beetle, but I think folks probably, even if they've been outside of the range of this project area, they probably still want to know what's going on beetle-wise, so I'll engage you as well. The data what we have is complete except for that threshold tweak. If you know, based on correlating the PSP data, and we find out that perhaps 18% for pure pine is that magic number that equates to 50% of basal area kill, then we'll rerun this information and then provide it again. So some of the other things that this data has used for, obviously, is a fuel inventory update. So this, as we talked about, or as Rob, yeah, as he discussed, there's been some fire implications from Mount Pine Beetle. And I've given the wildfire branch upstairs the access to the information as well. As we know, like as the moisture content drops in these things, fire behavior changes drastically. So it's good for them to have, for safety reasons for firefighters and everything else, to know what's going on the landscape as far as Mount Pine Beetle kill. And again, other direct data uses. Most companies know where the stands are that are more dead than others, but I don't think for the most part they've been quantified as far as this is how many dead trees we have, this is, or not dead trees, but this is what area we have of dead, that kind of thing. So I'm hoping that this is going to be very useful for companies to get this data and assist with plans. And for us, it will definitely help guide the planning of ground units. So timber supply analysis, it's very, very, very limited to date. So I know we were talking about midterm timber supply and things like that, but it's very early in the game to discuss that kind of stuff. Has Mount Pine Beetle impacted timber supply? Probably yes. It's highly variable where you are in the province. A place like P19, I'm guessing yes, the timber supply has been affected by the dead pine. Other places not so much. In the planning standard, 2.5% impacts to an FMU triggers a new timber supply, and largely we're not there with Mount Pine Beetle. So let's see here. What else can I say? And kind of a magic point at the bottom there is, when is the stand no longer contributing? You know, is it 50% of the basal area death? Is it under the assumption that the rest of that stand will die as well? That's kind of something that needs to be discussed and kind of hashed out. So the second part of baseline, what happens if we do nothing? That was one of the first questions I had. Do we need to do anything? Right? Do we always have to go in there and actively engage these things for rehab? And the answer is very likely to be no. There's a number of stands that will recover without intervention at all, and then others that will not be treated by conifer anytime soon. Some of those sites that Ellen's been up, those lower foothills F sites, for instance, those highly competitive, they turn into jungles. Those probably won't be a conifer stand for quite some time. But on the other end of the spectrum, you have those dry licheny sites that aren't overly competitive. They have thinned up. They probably would have something coming back in the near future. So So some of the other ongoing questions to our projects to help answer this question, I know the Caribou Grizzly, that's one. The Beyond Beetle Elms project, as well as FGRO, they have two projects ongoing. Their initial one, and then recently we had a new PSP network put in. Let's see here. As far as the new PSP network that went in, I think a lot of you are aware of that. But we had very few PSPs or ISPs that were actually had a lot of pine in them and were heavily killed. And statistically, you couldn't decipher anything from them from such a limited network. So what we ended up doing is looking and finding roughly 120 new establishments to add to that. Because what we wanted was 30 plots for 5 different natural subregions to try to get it, make it statistically valid, to try to look at those stand dynamics questions and basal area characteristics and fall down rates and all the rest of it that would come in, and ingress as well. So that's on the go, and I think FGRO has been managing that, and I think they're largely almost all established and initially measured, I think.
We're getting close, yeah. The last establishments should be done by July.
Perfect. So impact to ecological goods and services. Really what we wanted to do is find out those ecological goods and services, spatially locate them on a map, use our data of dead mortality areas to try to see where those intersected, to try to identify, okay, what are what are the spatially available and locatable values on the landscape, and have they been affected or not? That seemed to be a critical thing to try to find. A lot of this stuff, we can anecdotally say, yeah, we think this happens or this happens, but unless we can spatially explicitly locate it and try to see those interactions, then we can't really do a whole lot. So there's a lot of things like intactness, biodiversity, ecologically significant area, old forest, key wildlife biodiversity zones, things like that, or caribou habitat, bull trout habitat, Arctic grayling habitat, all those things that we know are key values, key ecological goods and services that we can also spatially locate. And we can find out what is the beetle doing to those. And there's other ones as well. And fiber is another key ecological goods and service that is an important one to consider. Be it for community stability, clean air, clean water as well, carbon sequestration, all those things that go along with a healthy, vibrant restock stand. So as far as have they been affected, we have that now. As far as the ones that have been identified to date, we have a good sense of have these things been impacted. Will they be impacted, or is the impact at a level that will actually be detrimental? That's a whole other question. And I think some of the people here are trying to answer those questions with the research work. And at what point is Arctic grayling impacted by the reduction of shade contributing conifers on the shoreline? We know that if you knock those trees down, the thermal load increases and the habitat quality goes down as the water temperature increases. But at what point does that occur? That kind of stuff is ongoing research questions that will be going on for quite some time. And really, this is a dynamic program. We take the best information that we have available at a certain time, and then continually adapt. And that's really what we have to do. We can't wait for perfect information. We have to start making decisions now on where to salvage, where to do rehab, where to replant, where we need to replant, all those kind of things. So it's important that we know that. I mean, just some simple spatial stuff. We know there's been almost 19,000 hectares of caribou habitat killed. But again, what does that mean? Folks in BC have said that caribou range that has been killed, and radio colored caribou move among those stands just as they did without any death. So at what point does it become detrimental? I know BC is doing a lot of work on that, and I'm sure FRI will continue to do that work as well. So again, it's an ongoing process to analyze, what are these impacts to ecological goods and services. This will go on for a long time. We're really keen on this information that's coming from BC, but as you know, BC information doesn't always correlate to what happens on the Alberta side, and that's why a lot of this work is being done on this side to try, okay, is that true here? And that's important to consider. What else here? There's a lot of things that are upcoming that are very exciting, like NetMap. We just looked at a NetMap program that allowed virtual watersheds, and if you actually took we did some tests with our mortality data, put that on the landscape, and actually found out what kind of thermal loading would you have on those streams because of that disturbance. So there's a lot of tools out there that exist right now that will help us make some of these decisions on whether or not, okay, maybe we should get in there and underplant along that stream to bolster that bull trout habitat or that Arctic grayling habitat. As far as post Beetle rehabilitation goes, how much do I have time? 5 minutes. Okay. Yeah, there's lots of talk before lunch about does the province have a program? Yes, we do. We've been putting a lot of money into free up to administer the program on our behalf, and I can't remember what amount's been spent to date, but I think you're going to give that update later, so I won't stay from there. So the question was, how do we choose stands for rehab? We had talked about that, and John was saying in his opening talk that it's a lot of it's we don't want to add a negative impact to these stands. So it's not just what can we do, let's plant trees to bolster values. right? We can't just go at it from that angle. We actually all have to step back and say, okay, by going down that road of knocking trees down and replanting them, what are we actually doing harm to? So it's a two-pronged approach. We have to make sure that any activities we do aren't going to be harmful, and where we do it will actually bolster the value that we're trying to mitigate. Let's see here. And again, this work costs a lot, so we have to be very strategic on where we put these activities. I'm not going to go through that graph. That's just an output diagram of the process that for a decision support tool that we've recently developed, and it's been distributed to a few folks. But it's that's the process that we take a disturbance unit and then run it through 5 different filters to find out, okay, is that a site that we actually want to do rehab in? And I'll just go through some of the things that we considered when we built this process. So the initial stand would go through first. It would look at, okay, what zone is it in? Is it an active in the leading edge zone? What is the merchantable pine component of this? What is the mortality level, which is based on the input units that we had? How close to a road is it? So if it's not going to be efficient to do any rehab work in it, it's not a good candidate. It can't be out in the middle of nowhere, which costs us 2 or 3 times as much to do the work. It's just not efficient. And what is the likelihood of independent recovery? So if we don't touch that polygon, will it recover on its own? That's obviously a key input. Because if there's likelihood that it will recover on its own, we shouldn't spend it back there. And again, the understory structure as well. If you go into a stand and there's plenty of understory, there's no reason to do any rehab work in there again, because likely you will have a mature timber supply there, and you will have a forest that will contribute other values. So that's kind of the first, you run it through that screen. Does the polygon stay or does it go? If it stays, it kind of goes through a whole other system, a whole other series of groups. One is a group 2, species of concern. Does it impact, what are the risk of clearing activities on habitat? And would that value actually be benefited by such activities? The next one is biodiversity, the same thing. Are we going into areas that by knocking down and replanting, would it actually decrease biodiversity? Will it decrease intactness? Will it degrade a key wildlife biodiversity zone that might be under the thermal protection? So would actually entering those activities to do that be harmful in the long run? Clearly we have to identify those up front. And public safety risk, you have, is there a risk of fire initiation? And fire is a big driver in this program. So are you in the community protection zone? Yes, well then that's a higher priority to do rehab in. Are you close to a power line to do ignition? Then yes, that kind of thing. And then as far as fiber production, fiber production being for community stability and carbon sequestration, clean water, etc. The fiber production, you're looking at it. You don't want to do your rehab in a poor site, for example, because clearly you're not going to create fiber for future generations. You're not going to do a lot there. So you want to have a good or moderate site. You also want to be somewhat close to a mill. In the future, you don't want fiber that's going to be very far from the mill. So that's the kind of thought process that goes into the system, where you're trying to best locate these stands that would do the best for ecological goods and services on the landscape. So output status. This is the draft output status, but from the current iteration of what we've been doing, we had about 29,000 hectares of polygons that went in, and at the end of it, about 3,300 came out as being candidates for rehab. And again, it's P19 is here, and these came out because they were in the caribou zone. That's why those stands in here are not candidates for rehab. And then again, it's kind of all over the board. And you can see what happens is it's very clustered, a shotgun approach where it's here, there, and everywhere. But you can definitely see there's a lot of grouping here. But yeah, this is kind of this will act as the basis for the current iteration of rehab work. But this is a pretty big step to get here. This is 2 years in the making of getting this mountain pine beetle data, building this decision support tool, trying to decipher the science around here about what stands might recover on their own, what might not, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of things kind of culminating here, which is pretty exciting for me. This has been a very fun project to date. So obviously, mountain pine beetle has had a significant impact to Alberta's forests. It's very much not as heavy as what was expected. When beetle came with that initial inflight in 2006, we were expecting BC-like impacts, and that has not occurred. In certain places, yes, the mortality is high, but generally, it's that level of mortality is not there. And from my point of view, data and information is the only way to come up with strategic approaches to doing your rehab. You have to have the inventory levels and to know what values you're actually targeting, that kind of thing. Let's see here. I think planning, a lot of the planning that the companies do and government does should become a lot clearer with this information. Growth and yield is steady improvement. We've seen a lot of good stuff come out of the last few years here. And just, we have to do things that make sense economically. We put a lot of money into this program, and we have to get bang for our buck. And that's it.